Pode começar.
Estamos ao vivo.
Perfeito. Pessoal, boa noite a todos. Meu nome é Bruno Laurino e eu vou ser o mediador do evento de hoje. E hoje é um evento único para a nossa comissão aqui da CAI, da Comissão da Advocacia Iniciante aqui no Paraná. Nós temos a honra de participar com o primeiro evento sobre Law Community. E esse evento, nós temos a honra de receber a advogada norte-americana, a Bray Connor, e nós não poderíamos colocar em palavras o quanto isso significa para a nossa comissão, e temos certeza que esse evento será grandioso para todo mundo que nos acompanha e vai aprender muito aqui conosco. Infelizmente, nós não temos a possibilidade de fazer uma transmissão do evento com a legenda em português, então esse evento será em inglês, e posteriormente ele será disponibilizado com legenda em português para quem queira assistir futuramente. Então, agora eu vou começar a falar em inglês o currículo da doutora Bray, e daí nós vamos começar um evento em inglês a partir de agora. Então, sejam todos muito bem-vindos. Bray, thank you for joining us. It's an honor for us to have you here. So, Bray is the director of the Center of Environmental and Climate Justice for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. She's responsible for the organization and strategy and collaboration with the association's network and chapters to address dismantling environment racism and building transformative change and nationally and internationally. She's the most recent ALD Chief Police Officer, and now serves as an American Bar Association presidential appointed member of the Youth at Risk Advisory Committee, and also teaches at UC Davis. Previously, Abra was the directing attorney of Healthy and Law Foundation of Silicon Valley and worked at the ACLU of Northern California, Center of Race, Poverty, and Environment, and AACP Legal Defense Fund, the White House, and the Capitol Hill. Before we start, please, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be talking with you all and to share a little bit about what it's like to be an attorney here in the United States. Thank you all for having me and for being interested in kind of what things look like here in the United States for young lawyers.
Thank you for joining us, and I'm sure that everybody's going to have a different view of how it is to be an attorney in the United States after this event. So before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks for our president of the commission, Mr. Luis Felipe Rodelli, and also to Mr. Felipe Wojciechowski, who is one of the attorneys who made this event possible. So, Abra, in name of our entire commission, thank you for joining us once more. Very well, Abra. First of all, we know that here in Brazil, we study law school from a civil law point of view. In the United States, you study civil common law point of view in the law school. So my first question is, because of that difference, how the law school is structured in the United States? And by that, I mean, how long does it last? And you have any subjects that are mandatory or that are optional? How does it work?
Yeah. So for us here in the United States, you go through kind of secondary school, kindergarten through 12th grade, and then you go to college, which is you would go to in order to major in a particular subject area. And then after that, then you go to law school. So you have to go to college first after you finish your K through 12 time, and then you go to law school after that. During your college time, what you major in, it doesn't have to be law. So you can major in anything that you want to, and then you go to law school. Law school at that point is 3 years, typically. So If you go straight through and you're not working, then you should be able to finish law school in 3 years. But that's also combined with that time in college, because you have to go to college in order to go to law school. So most people say that it takes about 7 years after K through 12 because of the college component. And then if you work as well, so some people may have a job during the day and they go to law school at night. So for those individuals, it may take 4 years for them to go through law school.
I get it. So in Brazil, it's totally different. We have a law school in 5 years, and then actually this is it, I guess. But if you wanna do the law school, here in Brazil we have how can I say? We have two main goals that the student has. He wants to be an attorney, or he wants to be a judge. He wants to be a promoter, and that's main split right there. So in the United States, the student who goes to law school, which is the main reason he goes there? He wants to be the attorney, or he wants to be the public server?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because it differs. So some people want to go to law school to be a judge, or to be someone who, like you said, will work for the government, as like someone who represents individuals, for example, for free, as like a public defender, or you work for the government, and so you would represent the state, or the United States, or like one of our states within the United States. But you could also go to law school and want to represent people. You could open up your own law practice and then represent people in that way. But some people in the United States, a lot of people in the United States go to law school and they don't actually want to practice law. So here, a lot of people may go to law school in order to get the background, in order to understand, how laws work. And they may, and what they do afterwards, it may be helpful to have a law degree, but they may not actually practice. So for example, a lot of people who work on Capitol Hill, which is where all of our legislative work at a federal level, at the United States level happens, a lot of people may have law degrees, but they're not actually in front of a judge. But it's helpful, for example, for them to have a law degree, because there may be a case that comes up from the United States Supreme Court, and there's a committee within Congress, like our House Judiciary Committee or the Senate Judiciary Committee. So there's two different committees, and it deals with judicial issues. And so those individuals are typically attorneys, because the way that they are helping with policy issues is from a legal perspective. My job, for example, I'm over for the NAACP, the Center for Environmental and Climate Justice. You don't necessarily need to be an attorney for this job. However, it can be helpful to have a law degree in a job like this, or for some of the work that I'm doing, because I am looking at different strategies of how do we advance environmental and climate justice issues. And so I'm able to use my law degree in order to think about ways that we can help communities across the country.
I get it. Nice. And so to be an attorney, you had to do the ABA test, right? And
Yes.
then how is the ABA test? And I mean, the difficulty of the methodology of it, the preparation for it, how does it work?
Yeah. So here, so when I first took the bar exam, pretty much every single state had a different exam. So if I lived, for example, when I lived in Washington, D.C., I took the Maryland bar exam because it's a state closest to Washington, D.C. So I'd take that bar exam. And And then when I moved to California, I had to take the California bar exam. So even though they're both bar exams, and I was already an attorney in Maryland, I still had to take another bar exam in order to be a lawyer in California. Now, the way that it works is that every single state, especially when I took it, had a different number of days that the bar exam was. So for some states, it was 2 days. For some states, it was 3 days. For some states, it was 2.5 days. And that made really a challenge to kind of, prepare for a bar exam. So for example, when I took Maryland, it was 2.5 days. And when I took California, it was 3 days. So typically it's about 8 hours per day of the exam. And you study for about 3 months prior to the exam. And then you take the bar exam. Now, there are a lot of states that will accept something that we call the uniform bar exam. So what that means is that you take the bar exam one time and it will allow for you to practice in a number of different states across the country. The states get to decide whether or not that bar exam works for that, if they will allow that bar exam in that state. But if they allow it, then you can use that bar exam in the state where they allow it to happen. Oftentimes places like California, Florida, Texas, they tend to want people to take their bar exam in order to practice in that state. And oftentimes what states will say is, well, there's something very specific about how you would do law here that would mean that you need to take our specific state bar exam. And then the other thing related to the bar exam is that in law school, you have to take an ethics exam called the Multi-State Professional Responsibility. So you take the MPRE and you take that in law school, and both of those things together will allow for you to be a barred attorney. So let's say you were to try to take the bar exam and you never took that ethics exam during law school, you still can't be a barred attorney because you would have to get a certain score on that ethics exam in order to be barred in that state. And that number also changes as well. So depending on what state you live in, you may have to get a higher score on that ethics exam in order to practice in that state. And then the last thing I'd say as far as like the methodology is that states are moving more to allowing people to use computers. But there was a time where you couldn't really use computers for the bar exam. But typically you still have to do the multiple choice questions, which are about 200 questions by paper, and then submit that information at the end of the day.
It has its similarities and has its difference between ours and yours, because here in Brazil, we have a unified exam for all the country. And then I guess it's 80 questions in the first day. And then we have a second day of tests. So if you get the lawyer license here in Brazil, you can advocate in the entire country, but it takes some difference between them. And actually, like the bar exam, you said that it was a unified states that had this. How many states does it have? Like half of the country, or not that many?
Yeah, the number is growing. It used to not be that many states, but there's been an effort by law students, by lawyers, even folks who've already passed the bar, to say there's really no need for there to be these state-specific bar exams because, oftentimes people move. And so like me, for example, when I left Maryland and I went and I was in the DC area and I moved to California, I had to retake the entire bar exam 3 full days, even though I was already an attorney and already a bar attorney. I had to pay the all hundreds of dollars, almost $1,000 to take the bar exam, even though I was already a bar attorney. I had to pay for all the study materials. So there's been an effort to try to get more states on board, and the number has increased, but there's still quite a few states who make people take their bar exam in the state.
And you said something that was about my next question. How much it costs? It's expensive? It's not that expensive? How does it work?
It's very expensive. So in the United States, what a lot of people will try to do is they will take, some people, if you don't have a lot of money before then, because law school is also very expensive, they'll actually take out a loan just for the bar exam. Yeah. A loan. Yeah. just for the bar exam. But what some people will do to, if you are, so we have like bar prep courses. So like Barbary, Kaplan, Themis, places like that. They typically will have folks who can be representatives on behalf of those companies, and you can like work as a representative in law school on behalf of that company. And if you do that, then you can at least potentially get a free bar prep, like a preparatory course.
Only the prep, not the exam itself.
Only the prep. But the prep courses are very expensive as well. They're typically like thousands of dollars just for the prep course. Mm-hmm.
So it's all very expensive.
Yeah, and then you have to pay for the bar exam. It's not like, so a lot of times it's only in 1 or 2 places in the whole entire state. So you may have to drive hours and hours away just to take the bar exam. And then also pay for your hotel stay while you're there. So it definitely costs thousands of dollars to take the bar exam.
So that's why the loan, right?
That's why the loan. Yeah, and then it's hard to work. So a lot of people don't work during that time. It's recommended that you study full time for 3 months. So, like, how are you gonna just like eat and just pay your rent, things like that during that time? So, yeah.
And for a Brazilian who wishes to go to United States and to advocate there, be an attorney there, be a lawyer there, I heard, I can't say for sure, but I heard that some states have different policies for a foreign lawyer. So how the Brazilian need to do, needs to proceed actually. If he can attorney at Florida or California, he will find some differences there.
Yeah. So a lot of times people will go to, for example, New York, and they will try to do international law there. Sometimes what I've seen folks do is, depending on what they actually want to do with their law degree, when they get to the United States, they may get an LLM, so like a master's of law, once they get to the United States, and that may be enough for them to kind of understand what's happening here and use that. But it definitely depends on where they want to live. Depends on what they want, where they want to live, which state they want to live in, and then what it is that they actually want to do. Because there's some jobs where you may not actually need to be barred. It's helpful to have your law degree, but you may not actually need to. So, and there's certain jobs, for example, with even the federal government, where that may be the case. And so it depends on like what the job is that they're looking to do afterwards. But a lot of times what people will do is also if especially if they're planning to do another degree, another like legal degree, like a LLM, once they get here, they'll talk with the career services at the school that they're planning to enroll in once they get to the United States.
I get it. But once he's in the United States, once a Brazilian is trying to get into the United States market of law market, let's say, you think the foreign lawyer, he will, how can I say, find some resistance, some prejudice from the American lawyers, the American law workers, or you think the United States is welcoming these people to be there?
So I definitely think that it depends on probably the position that people are looking to try to do. In general, though, I think that it's helpful for us to have different perspectives of how we can be a better legal system in the United States, where are some of the places where maybe we're missing some things. So for example, in the United States, we don't, there are kind of smaller pockets of individuals who practice, for example, human rights law. And it's not something that is required to be taught in law school. But oftentimes, what I found is that there's more of an emphasis on, like, for example, human rights law with attorneys internationally. And so that perspective, so for me as someone who does civil rights, is really helpful. So there may be things that we're fighting for here in the United States, and internationally, the conversation is a little bit, has gone further. There's more, it's like certain things are already kind of understood that they need to happen. So for example, I am going to the Conference of the Parties in a few weeks. And so some of the things that we're talking about from like a UN standpoint are much different or a little bit further ahead than where we may be in the United States, and sometimes vice versa. But having other perspectives, I think, is welcomed by many people. And it's just really about ensuring that people understand what your value is in bringing that different perspective.
I get it. But I think this is the point of view from the American attorney, American lawyer. On your experience, you think the American population, he will, how can I say, he will have a prejudice of having a foreign lawyer, a foreign attorney, or you think the American is okay with that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because the United States is so diverse that, for example, me as like a Black woman attorney in the American legal system, it's very, very small number, like less than 5%. And so the way that we even look at, so typically there is a large group of individuals who have been able to navigate, who've been able to kind of make their way through the American legal system. But the ABA now has recognized, our American Bar Association has recognized that this is a really big problem if we don't have other voices, include more diverse voices in who is considered an attorney, because to your point, there has been for such a long time in the United States, only, white males from the United States were the people who were considered, who could be an attorney. And that's changing. It's changing very, very slowly, because when you have, hundreds of years of people saying that these are the only people who can be considered a lawyer, then it makes it hard for people to recognize that things need to look differently. But I think that there is the one good thing, especially I'd say in the ABA right now, is that we are at a point where we're making history. We have a Black woman president of the American Bar Association. There's a Black woman president as the head of the National Bar Association as well. And in the United States, we have a number of bar associations related to folks' races or ethnicities so that they can find community for themselves in a way that like the ABA, for example, in the past did not necessarily create. So I'm not going to say there's not going to be any prejudice because, I've even faced it myself and I'm an American attorney, but I would say that it's a place where, you can speak up. We have, our Constitution, we have the First Amendment, which allows for there to be free speech and for people to share their perspectives. And that's what we've claimed that we fight so hard for, so that people can have different views and should be able to stand up for their rights.
I get it. And you said about the American justice system. How, if a Brazilian goes to the United States to be an attorney, what he will face? The American people, they believe it's a slow system, it's a fast system, it's a affordable system. It's how does it feel for you?
Yeah. So, well, our justice system is a lot broader than I would think of our like legal system. So our legal system, I would like how we would define it is like the lawyers, so the judges, the lawyers who are playing different roles, and the justice system may be for example, like our police officers, like would be a part of the justice system. We've changed, depending on who you talk to, they may call it like the criminal legal system as well, because it includes people who aren't attorneys as well, who help to make decisions about what happens in court. And I would say, that system looks very different depending on who you are in this country. So if you come here, people don't necessarily always know that you're a lawyer. So one thing that you may face coming here is, how do people feel about individuals who are immigrating to this country? So there's different perspectives about that depending on who the individual is. If you're someone who is fighting for the rights of all individuals to be able to live wherever it is that they want to live, you may see that as a really good thing, that individuals are being able to move around, exchange ideas. And then there's some people in this country who unfortunately do not necessarily feel that that is a good thing to happen. And so you may face people who will say things like, oh, well, why are you here? Like, why are you coming to this country to do this thing? And that's something to be prepared for, that everyone's not going to necessarily be welcoming. But because of how this country was founded, and because there were a lot of people who either forcibly ended up in this country, like Black folks, or they moved here, they immigrated here, and then they faced a lot of obstacles. There are, I'd say, at least some folks who understand that if people are coming to the United States to be a part of creating a better future, then that's a good thing. But it is something to keep in mind, that that's something to, that you may have to think about. Also, we have different ways that people are able to actually work here, right? So whether or not you have to get some type of visa in order to work here, or whether or not you're able to get some type of dual citizenship or green card, something like that, those are also obviously things to consider when it comes time to potentially think about working in the United States. And oftentimes I think that people think that, there's a world of opportunities that exist here, and there are some, but we still face a lot of problems that you would think should not exist in a country like the United States. One of the cases that I'm working on right now, one of the issues is in a place called Jackson, Mississippi. So it's in the southern part of our country. And there are folks who did not have clean water for literally months, and now, even though they supposedly have water that they can use, the infrastructure, the pipes that allow for the water to flow through are so old that it's going to take a lot of money, millions, probably billions of dollars, in order for them to have access to clean drinking water. And this is in one of our state's capitals. But the individuals who live there are predominantly Black people. And so something that you typically wouldn't see in certain parts of the country or in a state capital, we're seeing in 2022. So it's just something to be aware of, that those kinds of issues still exist in the United States.
I get it. I think I want to talk about being a young lawyer in the United States, because actually I'm a young lawyer at Brazil, so we may have something in common there. And what is the main challenge of being a young lawyer in the United States?
Yeah, I would say one of the challenges is, and it could also be a good thing, when you're first starting off your career, people tend to underestimate you. They tend to think that maybe you're not going to be able to win your case, or that you haven't been as thorough in your research. And that doesn't really, just because you're a young lawyer doesn't mean that that's the case. But that tends to come up. It's a challenge. It can be a challenge depending on who your supervisor is if you're first starting off, to be able to actually argue the case that you worked on in front of a judge, depending on who you are, and depending on, again, who your supervisor is. If you have a great supervisor, then they may just say, here, like, go ahead and take it all and just run with it and argue your case. But sometimes that's not the case for young lawyers. I'd say the other issue is, depending on what kind of law you practice, you're likely working probably the most hours. You're working a lot of hours as a young lawyer. People tend to feel like you need to put in the time and put in all of the effort to be able to demonstrate that you can move up in the legal profession. And then also a lot of the kinds of more, I'd say, specific jobs that have a specific focus, they require you to either have some kind of knowledge ahead of time, or to be able to carve out a space for yourself to do that work. So it's really hard for a lot of young lawyers to be able to get into the very specific type of work that they want to do right out of law school. I will say right now, one good thing that wasn't the case when I graduated is that there's actually just more jobs. When I graduated, we're in the midst of a recession and there were just no jobs. And so a lot of young lawyers were just not doing legal work. And it's really hard to actually get into legal work if you don't start doing legal work. So that can be a challenge as well.
Yeah, the longer you take, the harder it gets. So,
right.
And as you said, I figured that the main challenge is show you're worthy, right? And how do you show it? How do you overcome all those challenges?
Yeah. I think one way that you do it is by actually just being a good attorney. And I really like watching Marvel comics. So I think of Daredevil and Matt Murdock when he said, "I'm a really good lawyer." And so I think that that is a good motto to have as a young attorney. You're being a really good lawyer. I think another way to kind of show your worth, especially when you're first starting off, is to be available for different kinds of assignments. You may think that you have a very specific focus that you want to do work in, but honestly, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what may be out there until you try it. And to give yourself the chance to experience different things, experience different types of work. And I think that early in your career is really a way to do that. And it helps you to show your worth. It helps you to show that you're flexible, and you could adapt to different kinds of things that come up. And I think another way is, to really to pay attention to the details. I think that one of the main qualities that I also really appreciate seeing and when I was hiring attorneys as a directing attorney, my previous job, are people who I know that they're going to pay attention to the details, because especially the further along in your career that you get, you're doing different things, you're focusing on a lot of different things, and having your associates or young lawyers who you can rely on, making yourself reliable basically is something that I think takes you very far in your legal career.
I get it. And for overcome all those challenges, how the ABA helps the young lawyer? Does it have any structure? Does it have any means to help those lawyers?
Yeah, so the ABA offers a number of different resources for young lawyers. For example, if you want like writing tips, or if you are thinking about changing your career. So there's like an online career database that people can access for new jobs. It also really kind of one of the benefits of what I felt like I gained as a chief policy officer is a network. So you're just meeting other young lawyers and other lawyers, and sometimes folks who aren't even in the legal profession all across the country. And having a network of individuals that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can talk to about things that come up is really helpful, because there may be something that you're working on and no one else has ever seen it. But if you have a group of people who you can build and you feel that you can trust them with different issues that come up, that can help you to think differently outside the box about issues as they come up in your legal career. And the ABA is a great way to build that organically and with folks you may not have ever been able to meet outside of the association.
I get it. And by the way, here at Brazil, we have the Order of Brazilian Lawyers, who allow us to freely practice the advocacy. So we have a divisions inside of this order, and we have divisions in commissions. And one of the commissions is exclusively directed to the young lawyers of Brazil. Does the ABA have something like exclusively to young lawyers, a division, a committee, a commission itself?
Yes. So the ABA has the Young Lawyers Division, actually. And so most of the associations, so the ABA, which is one of the oldest and largest associations, has a Young Lawyer Division. But then, for example, other bar associations like the National Bar Association, which is the oldest and largest Black bar association, they also have a Young Lawyers Division. The Iranian American Bar Association. So all of these different bar associations typically have a Young Lawyers Division within them. So all of those different young lawyers divisions typically try to work together. Well, in an ideal world, try to work together for different events at times, or to coordinate like how we're able to help people to network, things like that. Or if there's different conferences, to share that information out to the other Bar Association Young Lawyer divisions as well. And so it sounds like it's pretty similar from the sense of all the young lawyers would be a part of that. In the United States, the ABA Young Lawyers Division, as soon as you graduate from law school, you start to get information about the Young Lawyers Division in case that was something you weren't necessarily thinking about when you were in law school.
I get it. And how working at ABA helps the young lawyer's career, or working at the ILD as well?
Yeah. So for I would say in my particular role as the chief policy officer, it was helpful for me to be able to have a better sense of other divisions and how all of our policy work kind of came together. So I had a sense of that prior to actually being elected into the position, but actually being the one who was ensuring that our policies moved through and would become official policy for the division, it allowed for me to have a different perspective. So for example, one of the resolutions that we passed through the Young Lawyers Division was around racism as a public health crisis. And even though it was something we were very interested in, and it gave our young lawyers the opportunity to be a part of, a conversation that was very timely because of COVID and who was being impacted. But after that, we wanted it to be the policy of the entire American Bar Association. And so that meant that there had to be individuals from other divisions and other committees who agreed with our perspective, so that when we actually brought it to the larger American Bar Association, then we would be able to have people to vote in favor of the resolution. And so that process happens during a number of meetings that happen prior to there actually being the House of Delegates. There's smaller groups of individuals of committees and divisions, and they will talk about resolutions that they'll support. And we were able to actually make that resolution. We got it passed the House of Delegates, and so now it's official ABA policy, and it started in the Young Lawyers Division, and now it's the policy of the entire association.
I get it. And in the middle of all of that, what do you think the YLD main projects and main goals are? How the YLD goes in everything?
Yeah. So, it changes with each person who becomes kind of the chair and the chief policy officer. So they get to kind of set what they feel like are the goals of that year. But when I was a chief policy officer and Troy Portis was our chair, one of the things, well, a few things that were really important to us was for folks to feel included, for folks to feel like no matter where they're from or wherever they went to law school, that there was a place for them within the ABA Young Lawyers Division, within our YLD. And that also that we were thinking about things from different perspectives. So, for example, when I became the chief policy officer, we had to make a decision about whether or not we were going to go back in person or whether or not we were going to be virtual for our policy making meeting. And for the mid-year meeting, we made the decision to have it completely virtual after thinking that we were going to be able to do it in person. And then for the annual meeting, we did hybrid for the very first time in ABA YLD history. We had a hybrid policy making meeting, but that was part of the kind of what our vision was, and what my vision was as a chief policy officer, which was to think about what are ways that we interact now. How do we utilize technology so that everyone can be a part of the conversations, and that we are really creating a space so that no matter where you are, we're trying to eliminate as many barriers as there may be to be able to participate. So, for example, it could be really expensive for people to fly to some of the places where we were having meetings. So by having a hybrid meeting, that allows for us to have more participation. And then by having it hybrid, there are some people who do actually want to be there in person. So it still allows for people to participate in that way. For Choi as well, she did a project on like women of color and the adversities, the obstacles that they face across the United States in being recognized and being heard in the legal profession. And so that was one of her initiatives, was to really raise the profile about how that comes up. We also did, because we have more Native American and Indigenous folks who are a part of the ABA, we had our first ever stolen land acknowledgement for our policy meeting, because we wanted to introduce to people the idea that even though we haven't necessarily been doing that in the past, we need to acknowledge people's different cultural and ethnic and racial backgrounds so that we can all feel like this is a place that that we want to be a part of.
I get it. And as we are talking about young lawyers, it occurs me something. Here at Brazil, we have a employability problem that is a constant problem for young lawyers. And in our commission, we focus on our main efforts to try to overcome that problem. And how does the young lawyer division there actually work this out? How you try to fix it?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I don't know if we've fully fixed it, because a lot of times it's linked to how well the market is doing, quite frankly. And so, like I said, when I graduated, it was not that great. And so there weren't a lot of jobs. But now we've reached a place where there are more jobs. And really, the bigger issue is young lawyers finding a job that they feel like is a fit for what it is that they want to do. So for example, some of our work, like with direct legal services, so that's where you would represent individuals for free, not necessarily on criminal cases, but on issues like maybe you need a will written, or maybe you need someone to represent you because you're being kicked out of your house. And so you can have an individual who will help you for free or for a very low amount of money to be a lawyer in that situation. And there is right now a shortage of attorneys who want to be in those kinds of positions because of the pay oftentimes. And then oftentimes you're working really long hours in those positions, and the pay is not necessarily the same as if you were in other jobs. So I think that we're still trying to figure it out ourselves, because a lot of times the folks who do want to help people in different ways, we haven't figured out a structure yet to ensure that people can do that, because law school is super expensive. And so a lot of people want to take jobs that will help them to pay off their loans after law school. And we do have a public service loan forgiveness program at a federal level. But it's just now starting to be something that people feel like they may be able to trust in, because there were a lot of issues with it in the past. So there was a national effort of organizations and students, and even my job now, the NAACP, coming together and saying, hey, we need to do something about loan forgiveness because it costs too much if you want people to be in public service.
Yeah, but I guess here in Brazil we have the same main worry, because we need to see how to fit the young lawyer in the market. That sometimes the market don't want to welcome the young lawyer, so we still have a lot to figure it out. And talking about yourself now, we've seen that you are really active about civil rights and working on the Jackson's water crisis, for example. It's a very current topic. How is it? How was it going through this, like this experience, like a young lawyer?
Yeah, it's a really interesting experience to, in this role, travel to different states and see that, for example, Black people continue to face issues that we would think would have been, fixed almost 100 years ago. And we, for example, have laws at the federal level. So we have the Civil Rights Act that was passed back in the 1960s. And some of the things that we're fighting, 40, 50 years later, are based on these laws that were passed back in the 60s and in the 50s, and in some instances as well, to say that we're supposed to not discriminate against people based on their race, based on their ethnicity, based on color, national origin, things like that. But we continue to see that. So in Jackson, for example, we have a predominantly Black city, one of the largest Black cities in the country. And it's definitely a large Black city and a state capital, which is important because our state capitals across the country are typically the places that get the most resources, or typically the places who don't necessarily see as much disinvestment. There's more investment because it's clear what's happening in the state capital. And in Jackson, you had a governor who is like the state kind of level, the state at the highest position in the state, who would make decisions to ensure that the mayor, who is the individual who at the local level makes a lot of the decisions about the water system, could not get money to fix their water issues. And oftentimes the mayor has to ask the governor, hey, can we have the funding that you've gotten from the federal government so that we can fix the water issues? And for years, the governor, different governors in Mississippi, and including the current one, told Black mayors, no, we're not going to give you money, or made it really hard for them to get funding. So earlier this year, when there was flooding that happened in Jackson, and it really shed a light on how bad the water system was there. A lot of people locally were saying they weren't surprised that it got to that point. They've been drinking tap water for years, or not tap water. They've been drinking bottled water for years. They don't trust the tap water because they've known that the tap water is not safe for them to drink. Mm-hmm. And in the United States, you pay taxes and you pay to, for example, have clean water. So you're supposed to be able to have clean, safe drinking water in your community. And there were individuals who were buying bottled water for years because they knew that the water wasn't clean there. There's been multiple reports in the United States kind of showing as well that if you live in a predominantly Black community or community with folks of color, that you're more likely to live near environmental hazards and pollutions than in other communities all across the country. The first time that they did that study was back in the 1980s, and they made that connection. They did a similar study 2 decades later. They made the exact same connection. And then now we're seeing that same connection in 2022 in Jackson. We saw it with Flint as well, but Jackson for sure. It's mind-boggling that the governor knows that he could fix it and has done everything in his power not to. So I had the opportunity to go in front of our Congress and testify, offer congressional testimony as a witness, explaining to the Committee on Homeland Security why what was happening in Jackson was an issue and why what's happening in Black communities is a problem. And then we also filed a complaint, an administrative complaint, where we're able to use our civil rights laws to share with an agency, in this instance, the Environmental Protection Agency, hey, you need to look at what the state of Mississippi is doing because it's wrong and they're discriminating against Black people. So in 2 days, we should know whether or not the agency, the EPA, will be opening up our administrative complaint.
Let's hope for the best in those 2 days, but unfortunately, I can tell that the United States and Brazil have so many in common that it shouldn't exist, but
right.
I believe that it's part of our work to stand against it. So
yeah,
we'll see. Bray, if you ever give to any tip or counsel to a Brazilian lawyer who wants to be an attorney to advocate in the United States, what would you say?
I would say bring your boldness and your confidence to the work here. We need desperately to think outside of the box about what it means to be an attorney here, what it means to do legal work in the United States. And I think that it's going to take us having individuals who don't necessarily, look at things the same way that we've seen them here done before, for us to realize that we can do things differently. And so it shouldn't just necessarily be about trying to fit into how we've been doing things here in the United States, because we've definitely messed up a lot. And so it's going to take, folks coming here and saying, hey, I've seen this really great model, or, this is maybe something that we can consider in this way in order for us to have a better country.
And now my final question, my final everything actually. For those of us here in Brazil, there at United States, any tip, any counsel for a young lawyer that needs to overcome its difficulties? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say if you're trying to overcome the difficulties that may exist, just trust yourself. Know that, oftentimes a lot of people, they're able to move forward in life because they believe in themselves. They believe that they can do it. And I remember one of my first cases that I had, I was really intimidated about the person I was going up against for a number of reasons, the amount of time they had been practicing and things like that. And I realized that there were some very basic things about how they were going about thinking about that case that were just wrong. And so recognizing that just because you're starting off, that doesn't necessarily mean that you know any less, or that you're not as prepared, and to use it to your advantage. Use the fact that people feel like oh, they're not going to be as prepared. Use that to your advantage. I used to do that all the time. And then I would go into the courtroom and I would win my case. So, so I think that is something, you know, knowing in the back of your head that, you know, you're prepared, really, you know, thinking about things from different angles, and also knowing that just because, and I said this before, but just because it hasn't been done before, that doesn't mean that your idea is wrong or bad. It just means it hasn't been done before. And that is the power of being a young lawyer, is not being disenchanted to this is how things have to be done in order to move forward.
Perfect. Before we finish, our president of the commission, Mr. Luis Felipe Rodelli, like to say a few words.
I just want to say thank you for your presentation, Abram. You are just fantastic, simply the best. And just thankful for your sharing your knowledge and your point of view of tips and the way of lawyer in American. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that I had the opportunity to chat with you all and to share my perspective, as you stated. And thank you all for reaching out. This is absolutely fantastic that you're even doing this. And we definitely have to do more of this in the United States because we don't do enough at all. So kudos to you all.
Abra, thank you so much for your presence. I do hope that is not the last time we cross paths professionally. And then I do hope that we can have a brighter future after this event and things come down for the best. And I cannot put down in words what it means for us to have you here tonight. So thank you very much once again.
All right,
Pessoal, como eu falei, a live hoje foi em inglês, mas ela será disponibilizada mais tarde em português, com a legenda em português. E agradecemos todos pela presença. A live vai ser encerrada agora. Uma boa noite a todos. Have a good night, Abra.
thank you. Bye.
Before you leave, Abra, I want to ask to take a picture with us.
Yeah, of course.
For sure, for sure.
But I think, wait a minute, Abra. Vanessa, você pode encerrar a live já, por favor. Fique à vontade.